So most of us know that the thing that sets the price that a item will sell at is the supply and the demand. How many of those items are there and how much do people want it? So when I'm looking at sports cards, something that you're always having to kind of think about is this a common card? Is this a card that is out there, the pop count is way up high? Is this a low pop count card? Is this a easy card to replace or to find? And so one of the things I have thought about for a long time as I've been collecting vintage cards is what is the pop count and are the values when you compare football to basketball to baseball cards, specifically with vintage. Because I remember as a kid, there were baseball cards everywhere, but were there as many basketball cards and were there as many football cards? And how about in the generation before me, the ones that I tend to collect, the late 50s, the 60s, the 70s, were football and basketball cards as readily available? And so in this video, I'm going to take a look at comparing baseball card values to football card values to basketball cards in vintage. So we're looking at 50s, 60s, 70s, and we're going to include 80s as well. And so when I'm tabulating this information, I definitely think it is interesting to see how the pop counts are different, the values are different, but why are certain cards not worth more than they are? And are some cards overvalued? So we're going to take a look at it. Tell me what you think. See if you have opinions or share your opinions with me on what you get out of this data. It's definitely interesting. Definitely think it's worth taking a look at. Let me know what you think. All right. So first off, some of us may be new to this. A lot of us probably aren't. But PSA's website, psacard.com, has a lot of helpful tools for us. So the first thing I am doing here is I am going over to the POP report. This is the population report. So I'm going to go in here and click on POP report. And when I do that, I can search for any card that I want, or even more than cards. There are packs and autographs and things like that as well. But I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to put in a 1958 Jim Brown card. And when I put that in, you're going to see the results pop up. And when the results pop up, you'll see there's a bunch of different options. Well, I want the tops, the 1958 tops Jim Brown. I want to look at the Jim Brown rookie. So the first thing when I click on here, I am going to do is notice that there are a lot of different menus here. I'm going to start first at the POP report. How many exist? So when I go on here, what it does is it actually pulls up the whole 1958 top set. And I'm going to look down here and I'm going to find that Jim Brown card. So as I'm scrolling down, there's the Johnny Unitas. You can see there's 1,183 Johnny Unitas 1958 cards have ever been graded. Now, if you know the number of the card, that would obviously be the most helpful thing, because then right off the bat, you can find the card. But this is number 62, the Jim Brown. So if we look over here, in a 1, there have been 145 Jim Browns graded in a 1. And there have been 23 of those have a qualifier, which might be like an OC or a stain or somebody wrote on it, so there's a mark. But you can look up how many exist. So there are only 4,022 graded Jim Browns. There is not a single PSA 10. There are only 6 PSA 9s. All right. So this is the first thing we want to take a look at is the POP report to see how many are out there. So again, this is number 62 for the Jim Brown. And if I was interested in buying, say, a PSA 4, I would look here and I go, okay, there's 798 that exist. Now let's go on back up to the top. And when we get up there, I'm going to click on prices. So there are a lot of different tools out there now that we can use to determine the value of a card. One of those is PSA's value book. So if I look down here at the same set, I'm in the same 1958 Topps football set, and I go back down to that Jim Brown, I can see here that a Jim Brown in a 5 sells for $29.25. That is their valuation. Again, there are lots of different valuations out there. This is PSA's. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use PSA's pop count and I'm going to use PSA's grade book to determine values. Now, is this the best grade book? No, I don't think that it is, but it's a decent one and it's consistent with how it collects the data to determine the prices. So just so you know, for the data for this video, we are looking at the PSA pop counts and we are looking at the PSA price guide. That will keep things consistent for our data all the way through. All right, so let's start looking at the comparison. So what we're doing here is I'm looking at rookie cards only. A lot of people like to collect Hall of Fame rookie cards. Now, not every one of the cards that I have chosen here are Hall of Famers, but to me, they're either Hall of Famers or they're some of the iconic rookie cards and well-known popular rookie cards from each decade. So looking here at the 1950s, again, we have sort of the iconic 50s football rookie card, 50s basketball rookie card, and then baseball card. So we look in here and we have a Jim Brown. Now, I chose PSA 5s to do this. Now, I wanted to choose the same grade to compare the cards. And what I did was I chose the median, the middle. So it's not always 5s. The most common grade of most of these cards in the 1950s is a 5. There are a bunch of 2s, 3s, 4s. There are some 7, 8s, 9s. But the most frequent is a PSA 5. So that's what we're going to be comparing. So for Jim Brown, we have $2,925 is the value according to the PSA price guide, and there are 753 of them that exist in a 5. The 1957 Topps Johnny Unitas is a very iconic rookie card as well from the 50s. There are 657 PSA 5s. Now that is only 800 and Bart Starr is 1350. So you might initially look at the price and go, why would Bart Starr be worth more than Johnny Unitas? But then you look and you go, oh, it's because the pop count is almost double for the Johnny Unitas. So the supply is significantly higher for the Johnny Unitas than the Bart Starr. Now, one of the reasons might be that the Johnny Unitas is a double print in that year. That could be the reason why. It could be something else. It could be the demand for the card. We have a 1951 Bowman Tom Landry, and there's only 126 of those. And it's only worth $300. So the supply is low, but the price is low, so the demand must be pretty darn low. And in 1950 Bowman Autogram, there's 125 of them, and that sells for $825. So the total population of the 5 cards chosen in football, which are kind of 5 of the most sought after 1950s rookies. Now, somebody will tell me I'm wrong, which I probably am, but they're 5 of the most popular ones. There's a total of 2,023 that have been graded. The total value of the 5 rookie cards is $6,200. Now, if we go over here to basketball, most of the basketball, because they didn't make basketball every year, most of them are coming from the 1957 set that has that famous Bill Russell, which you can see right here. That Bill Russell in a 5, according to the PSA price guide, is $15,000, and there's only 135 of them. Bob Cousy, 165 of them for $1,650 as the value. Now, there's a few things I take away here. One thing I take away is the basketball seems to be the rarest in the 50s. There are not a lot of Bill Russells. There are not a lot of Bob Cousy's compared to the Jim Browns, the Johnny Unitas, or even the Bart Starr. But then you look at baseball and you say, oh, the Mickey Mantle rookie, the Willie Mays rookie. There's twice as many of those in a 5 as there is the Bill Russell. But the Mantle and the Mays are still quite a bit higher. So why is that? Is it that the Bill Russell's undervalued, or is it that the demand for the Mantle and the Mays is significantly higher? I would say that the demand is significantly higher. Another thing I wonder, though, is why is Hank Aaron's rookie is $6,100? Is it because the demand is that much lower, or is it because there are 3 times as many 5s as there are the Mantle and the Mays rookie? But then we have Ernie Banks here. Ernie Banks, there are less Ernie Banks than there are Hank Aaron's, right? There's an extra 300 Hank Aaron's in there, but the price is what? 3 times as much, almost 3 times as much for the Aaron. So is Aaron that much more desirable than Ernie Banks? I would say he must be, because his supply is higher and his price is higher. So there must be a lot more demand. But my takeaways here in this page for me are there's hardly any basketball that's been graded in 5 in the 1950s. That's interesting to me. And football about half as much as baseball. So baseball, significantly higher supply. Let's look at the 1960s. When we look at the 60s here, we've got the Gale Sayers, the Blitnikoff, the Butkus, the Ditka, and the Namath. The Namath is by far the most valuable, but it also has a pretty high supply. It is the second most common, only to the Sayers. So that's interesting that the Namath would be, 20 times the value, not quite 20 times, 15 times the value of the Namath is worth 15 times a Gale Sayers rookie. It's interesting to me. Let's look at basketball. In basketball, we have a lot more graded here compared to football. Football is a lot less commonly graded, but the prices of basketball are significantly higher. And I would say the reason for that probably is the demand, because look at the names on this list. Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Lou Alcindor, Oscar Robertson, and Wilt Chamberlain. You could make an argument those are 5 of the top 10 players of all time. Versus over here, probably the best defensive player of all time, maybe. Namath, I don't think most would think is a top even 5 quarterback. And Gale Sayers, is an amazing running back, but is he a top 5 running back? So the names here, to me, show that the demand is very high. But again, look at the pop counts. There are 751 Lou Alcindors compared to, an Elgin Baylor or an Oscar Robertson or a Jerry West. That is kind of interesting. But then baseball is by far, again, the most common. The pop count of a Carl Yastrzemski is 2165 in a 6. Now, I did 6s in the 60s because, again, that is the most common, the most frequent grade. So it's a little bit newer, a little bit easier to get a 6 than a 5. So these are all 6 values in populations. And the 70s will be 7s and the 80s will be 8s. But the Reggie Jackson, there are almost 2,000 Reggie Jacksons in a 6. And it's worth $525. There are 1,100 Pete Roses, and it's $3,000. Now, I like Pete Rose. And Pete Rose is, he's all-time hit leader. Why is his rookie card worth more than Lou Brock, Carl Yastrzemski, Rod Carew, and Reggie Jackson combined? What would you rather have? These 4 and $1,000 or a Pete Rose? It's interesting to me. But then when we compare the different sports, the most expensive card on here is the Wilt Chamberlain, only followed by the Namath. Would you rather have an Oscar Robertson and a Lou Alcindor rookie card or a Namath? They're almost the same price. Sometimes this doesn't make sense to me. Why is Namath so high? Is his demand that high? The other thing about the Namath is it's a tall boy. It's not a standard size card, so it doesn't really fit with your collection and all of the rest of your cards. It's harder to display. I don't really understand the Namath. That stands out to me here. The fact that basketball and football are similar pop counts stands out to me here. But the Pete Rose, I mean, is he really that much more valuable? I'd love to have a Pete Rose rookie, but I'd love to have any of these rookie cards. So interesting here. Let's look at the 1970s. Again, sort of the iconic or one of the iconic cards shown below for each. So in the 1970s, the big card for football is the Walter Payton. And the Walter Payton, there's almost 2,400 of them. And Terry Bradshaw, there's only 785, but Terry Bradshaw, who's a quarterback, and quarterbacks generally have the most value. But Walter Payton is Walter Payton. And why'd you throw in Steve Spurrier? I threw in Steve Spurrier because when I was reviewing a bunch of lists, that was one of the common rookie cards that everyone kept talking about. So I was like, all right, let's throw it in there. But Roger Staubach's better than Joe Namath, in my opinion. Well, is he? Maybe he's not. I don't know. That's a debate for another story. But Terry Bradshaw won all these titles. You know, you got $700 for the Bradshaw, but $450 for the Staubach, compared to the Namath, which is $67.50. I don't know. Still don't understand that Namath all that much. Like, it is an iconic card. I get that. In the 70s basketball, we've got a lot less, not a ton of 70s basketball graded in these iconic rookies. And some of the reason for that is the names aren't quite as appealing. I mean, Cowens and Barry are Hall of Famers and amazing players, but, you know, even Walton, great player, but the name appeal really pops here at the Maravich and the Irving. But the names in football in this decade, the O.J. Simpson, the Staubach, the Bradshaw, and the Payton, stand out a little bit more than Cowens, Barry, and Walton. And then over on the right, we have the Thurman Munson. Again, these are sevens because we're in the 70s. Thurman Munson, there's 1,000 of them. It's only worth $275. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. I mean, George Brett, there's 3 times as many George Bretts, and the price is worth 50% more. Does that make sense? I don't know. Mike Schmidt is worth almost as much as Thurman Munson and George Brett combined. And the Schmidt, there's about 2,000 of them. I mean, Mike Schmidt might be the best third baseman of all time. So it might be fair. We have Don Baylor and Dusty Baker share a rookie card. There's only 511 of them, and that's only worth $80 in a 7. I don't know. Carlton Fisk, high pop counts. So the big thing here are the high pop counts in baseball, I think, are driving down the value. This is when the prices really started to slow down in value because the population counts, I believe they started ramping up production. But in basketball, the production is the lowest. And the big card, I think, on this whole page to me is probably Julius Erving. I mean, there's less than 1,000 of them out there in a 7. And it's only 1,700. That seems like a fairly good deal to me. I mean, Julius Erving, when you compare it to the 60s again, you know, you could buy, I mean, Julius Erving is half as much as Jerry West and Oscar Robertson. And yeah, maybe. I guess it's a demand thing. Interesting, at least. Let's look at the 80s for a minute. So in the 80s, the pop counts in football went through the roof. That 84 set, tons of them, 86 even more. There's 13,000 Jerry Rice rookies in a PSA 8. Now, I have one of those. I have one of the 13,056 of them is in my house. And I love the card, but that's a lot of them. 13,000 is a ton. Same with Dan Marino. The Marino's only worth $1,200, and he's a top, maybe a top 5 QB. I mean, I think he's better. I think him and Elway are better than Namath, but the price, 120, 125, and it's got to be largely because of the population. I know I'm going to get some comments about why do you hate Joe Namath. I don't hate Joe Namath. I just don't understand the prices for, I mean, okay, Joe Montana is $375. There's 8,000 of them. Well, there's pretty low pop count for the Namath, but he's not Joe Montana, that's for sure. 46,700 population count. So football started the printing presses up big time in the 80s. In the 80s for baseball, I mean, there's that iconic Ken Griffey Jr. card. There's 36,000 in an 8. Again, we're in the 80s, so we're looking at 8s. 36,000? That's a ton. That's why it's only worth $85. The Ricky Henderson, there is 11,210 of them in an 8, which is why, $290. Cal Ripken, he was sort of the shortstop. How many All-Star games did that guy go to? His rookie's only worth $50, largely because there are so many of them. So one of the reasons basketball is so much more valuable, especially the cards from that 86 set, and then obviously the 3-panel 80 set, is because there are so few compared to the other sports. I mean, 23,000 versus 46,000 and 71,000. Bird and Magic, huge demand. 2 of the best players of all time, and 2 players that really, you could argue, helped save the NBA during the early 80s before Jordan came along. Again, the pop count is really high on the Jordan, as is the value, but the demand, I mean, who doesn't want that card right there? That card is as high a demand card in basketball probably as there is. Barkley, 335. There's almost 4,000 of them. Why is he worth over twice as much of Karl Malone when the pop counts are the same? I mean, I don't know. I would rather have a Barkley, so I guess that's why it's the demand, but Barkley wasn't twice the player of Malone. And then again, takeaways here. Basketball has a lot of value, and a lot of the reason for that is there are so much less basketball cards than baseball and football. But I just thought this would be interesting to take a look at and just have a conversation about and kind of look at the numbers. This is, to me, a lot of fun. So the overall totals here, when we look, basketball, there's only 28,000 of the 20 cards we looked at, versus baseball, there's over 90,000 of the 20 cards we looked at. The total value is so much higher of basketball and baseball. Baseball probably because there's so many more baseball collectors. But why is that? Why do so many more people want baseball cards than basketball and football cards? Tell me what you think about that, but I don't really understand that. I mean, right now, if you were to say what's the most popular sport in the United States, it would be football. Football is the most popular sport in the United States. If you were to say worldwide of the 3, it might be basketball. But the values of football are dragging big time. And other than the 80s, when they really ramped up the printing presses, it's not like there's a ton of those out there. To me, when you compare popularity, football is number 1 right now. Baseball was number 1. I don't know. Are we just a bunch of old guys sitting around collecting baseball cards, and the next generation's not going to be into them, and they're all going to want the football cards? There might be a bit of a opportunity if someone were to go after football and basketball. part of the reason that I have been collecting those, I think, is just because I don't understand why they're cheap. Why can I buy a second year Jim Brown in a 1960 or a 1959 Jim Brown? I just bought a 1959 Jim Brown in a 6, his second year card, for $400. Can't buy a second year Willie Mays or Ernie Banks or Willie Mays or Hank Aaron in a 6 holder for $400. Why is it so cheap? Why is it so affordable? Jim Brown might be the best player ever, and his second year card is very affordable. I don't know. I've never understood it, but I just think this would be an interesting thing to share. Again, share your comments. That's a lot of the fun, is talking about it together, sharing our thoughts. So appreciate you watching, and take a minute to like and subscribe and comment if you would.